Welcome to the Lightforge podcast. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Hope you guys are having a good one. We're at the end of April now. We're inching closer to summer. Just
Yeah,
like time.
2021 has moved at a freaking breakneck pace, whereas 2020, at least for me, it was so slow.
Yeah, 2020 was slow and very nerve-wracking in many ways. And 2021, it definitely seems to be moving quite a lot faster. And I think some people can see a light at the end of the tunnel, although I don't know.
What? What do
I'm
you
not
mean?
exactly
We're
sure.
already at the light. Well, we're out of the tunnel. Everything's
We're
fine now. Everything's
Yeah,
better than it was.
everything is better.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is bad. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Arena is at its best point since at least 5 days ago. We'll see. Uh,
Here's what's happened in Arena. They hit the button, and Demon Hunters went down, and Druids and Rogue went up. And over the course of the week after they hit the button, it became apparent that Druids and Rogue actually went up quite significantly. We talked about Rogue kind of dominating before, but Druid is now leading at like 54%, and Rogue is at pretty much 54% too. And 54% win rate on HS replay is not the most terrible thing, but it's not balanced. Like half the metas are better than this in terms of class balance. So I think it's worth it to note that yes, they did push the button, but the class balance in the arena right now is not actually great.
yeah. Right now, Druid is a little bit, tiny bit ahead of Rogues at 54.2%. This is as of Sunday night. And then Rogue is a little bit under 54%. But if you look at the cards that are the most common in these classes, you'll see exactly how they win and why Druids more so than Rogues are frustrating to play against, I would say. So the number one card for Druids is Venomous Scorpid, and Venomous Scorpid creates spells. And Druids have very, very good spells, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Mark of the Lotus, which is the number two card, as in the most common class card for Druids, Arbor Up, which we know is an all-time amazing card, just one of the best cards ever. I think we can say that. Dreaming Drake, which is insane tempo. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're happy dropping it on 3, and you're really happy whenever it gets corrupted as a 3 mana 5/6 taunt. Nature Studies, which is really just another Mark of the Lotus or Arbor Up. And then you have all of these small minions like Hog Rancher, Acorn Bearer, Sun Will Initiate that really takes advantage of all of these buffs. So Druids have this playstyle where they get onto the board, they can spread out. Uh, the card I mentioned, by the way, Acorn Bearer, it plays such a big role in Druid win conditions now, where, this is a card that was like fine when it just came out. But now, because of all of these buffs and, nature studies, the reintroduction of Mark of the Lotus, Arbor Up, um, I have won and I have also lost to a lot of Druids playing Acorn Bearer into those stupid
Mm-hmm.
squirrels. And I am so afraid of those squirrels now. When they play the Acorn Bearer and I look at my hand and I don't have like, the AoE or the pen flinger into like lots of spells, I know I'm in trouble. Like I know I'm in trouble as soon as the Acorn Bearer drops. And this is how Druids win. Yes, there are definitely some AoEs in the meta. Druids test you to have them
Mm-hmm.
immediately and to be able to play them immediately. Otherwise, the snowball is insane. The face damage is insane. And it's funny because Druids lost a lot of direct damage, but with this macro adjust, their snowball potential is so insane that they are by far kind of like the class that is most likely to just smoke you down from the board and just have this early pressure. A turn 2, turn 3 Mark of the Lotus a lot of times just wins the game.
Yeah. For like druids, it's at the point right now where once you get to a certain point, I think like just usually, right? I am not even playing around Arbor Up. One, because you kind of can't, but two, because if they have an Arbor Up, they're going to probably win. I've kind of given up if they have an Arbor Up at the right time, right? I'm not talking about like a turn 9 Arbor Up where you can do stuff with. If they have a turn 5 Arbor Up and you can't clear their board on 4 without doing heavy sacrifices, you've just lost, and that's okay. You're going to lose some. Like, this is not a balanced meta right now, and Arbor Up is a hugely imbalanced card. But you can't play around these things too much. Like, if you keep trying to clear the Druid, and you, either one, you clear stuff, but they still have stuff to buff, they can still overrun you, and you will still lose, right? And you've gotten rid of your own out, which was to deal enough face damage and or to get through in some other way, or just challenge them to not have that Arbor Up. So when you're facing Druids, the biggest mistake I see people make is that they're really focused on preventing the Druid from doing what the Druid wants to do. That is a good strategy in a vacuum, but you have to recognize sometimes that if you can't perfectly do that because you're not on the board enough, your deck is not good enough, whatever, but if you can't pull that off, the Druid is going to win anyway. Whereas if you keep trying to do that, the Druid may not even have an Arbor Up, may not even have other stuff. You've just given the Druid so much credit that they're going to win anyway. So the way to deal with a Druid is generally to ignore things like Arbor Up, things like Mark of the Lotus, which you can't really play around anyway. Know that as a Druid, it is very easy for them to get +1/+1 on all their minions. They have many ways to do that right now. They have that Twin Spell card, they have Mark of the Lotus, they have Power of the Wild still in the game. They just have a lot of ways to do it. So they could generate spells to do it, and the spells are like 1 mana, right? Or 2 mana, or 3 mana. So they can play it on the same turn they generate the spell. Just always be ready for that. Like, if the difference between you going face and you clearing is that they buff +1/+1 and totally destroy you, it's clear. Like, if assuming you don't have a read. But if the difference is not that, if they just get a little bit of extra stats on the board, don't worry about it. You need some face damage. It's very important against the Druid. And a lot of times, people are like, oh, all Druids have 2 Arbor Ups and 1 million Scorpions. They don't. Like, go on HS Replay and click and see how many of these cards that Druids have on average. It's lower than you think, because you have PTSD from all those Arbor Ups that come in and destroy you. That doesn't mean Druids are bad without Arbor Up. Like Merp said, right? Like, the Mark of the Lotus is insane, Scorpion's insane. I just got a 12-win run in the only Druid run I played last week without either of Scorpion or Arbor Up, and I have 1 Mark of the Lotus. But I had a curve, and I had a bunch of slow but steady buffs and board control-y stuff, and it kind of works out. The meta is just very good for this kind of stuff because your options of getting rid of things are limited. They exist, and if you need to get rid of a particular minion, you generally can. But with Druid, you're not trying to get rid of a particular minion. You need to get rid of all the minions, or else you get screwed. And you don't have enough removal to keep up with that without a giant board clear. So, just I think of it as a pressure relief valve, where at certain times you're like, well, if they give +1/+1 to all their minions right now, it's a good move for them, but it's not going to make me lose the game or anything. Then I let them do it. And so if they do use it, that's 1 less buff all they have in their hand. Right? You gotta let them use these cards at some points, because they'll find a chance at some way to do it, unless you're playing a perfectly dominant game.
Yep. So Druids right now are the king of the meta. If you've been playing Arena at all, you understand why. And a lot of what we're saying right now, you probably have in some capacity already seen. Rogues, on the other hand, are a little bit different. Still very dominant. I would say the way that they win is less annoying by some people's standards. And it's mostly from what I've seen on in Twitch chat from other people's channels, and also on Arena HS, in which there actually is just a thread complaining about Druids, and the complaints about rogues are not as abundant. But if you go and look at the most common cards for rogues, number 1, it's Wicked Stab, which in 2021 is like the best reach in the game. I'm actually surprised that they printed this, but not really surprised that if they were to print it, it's like a rogue card, right? That this is mana efficient for kind of any time, like in Hearthstone's history, but with Hearthstone and Blizzard focusing more on board control, on letting people kind of at least do a little bit more before the face damage comes out. Wicked Stab is an anomaly, and it really closes out games, or it's just super efficient removal in the early mid game. Then, of course, Venomous Scorpid, Wand Thief, in which you can get more of that direct damage, Swashbuckler, Kurt's Vagrant, which you just cannot get rid of. Like, you cannot really remove. Polymorph is gone. Yeah, sure, there's Hex, but great. And then Volpera Toxin Blade, which is a lot more damage as well. And one of the cards that's really, really been, I guess, shaping the rogue experience is Efficient Octobot, which is the 8th most frequent card in rogue decks. And I want to point this out because it's Mulligan Win Rate, which means whenever it pops into your hand at the beginning of the game, whenever, in the mulligan, it's 67%, 67.5%. That's an insane percentage. Up there with like the best cards or the best early / mid game cards ever printed. And it really exemplifies what rogues are able to do well, as in that 1/4 body is going to frenzy in the early game, reduce everything, and rogues can just tempo out super duper hard and do in sort of similar fashion what Druids are doing, but in a very different kind of visual way. Like, they put a lot more tempo out in the early and in the early game and early mid game than what people are expecting, and they're able to capitalize on that and finish you off from your lack of options after they chunked you in the face.
Yeah. The way to play against rogue is you can't. You kind of just, rogues do what they do. They control the game. They have all these options. They are playing like kind of like half solitaire. I mean, they do interact with your board, but in a limited fashion, just really to remove all your stuff. And other than that, there's not much you can do with it. So I'm going to talk about 2 ways you could play against the rogue. They're not, this isn't like a foolproof strategy. This isn't like going to increase your win rate by, maybe more than like 5% at most. But that's just because there's not much you can do against the rogue. And so it's crazy to me that Druids are the ones people complain about the most, because I guess it feels like there's less you can do against a Druid. And that's true when they play their cards. But rogues have more of these cards that you can't do anything about. A lot more that get offered to them. And the end result is, I guess, like, at least in my opinion, I think rogues are harder to deal with than Druids more often. Because for Druids, it's really just a couple bombs. And if they have it, they win. If they don't have it, they don't win. And if they have it, they don't win half the time anyway. With rogues, it's a whole lot of bombs that don't look like bombs, but you add 2 or 3 of them together and they are bombs. And every rogue past a certain win rate kind of has them. And there's nothing you can do about it once they set up. So the little things you can do to prevent rogue dominance is, 1, have a lot of ways to deal 1 damage, or especially if you have 1 damage board clears. At some point, the Miscreant is going to come out. At some point, rogues always go wide. This is just what rogues do now. In every rogue deck that I have faced, 1 or 2 damage on the board going wide is a part of their strategy at some point in the game. They may have other things that they're doing, but that's always going to be there. So don't waste your pings. If you can do something while saving a ping, or if you have no other pings left in your hand or board clears, and you have an option to use it and get a little bit of tempo, don't do it. Save it for a big swing, unless you're about to win or something, right? Because the rogues will give it to you. That's how they generally win. And the second thing is, we'll count it as part of we'll call it the second thing. It's really 2 things, but 1. Don't play entirely defensively and reactively, unless you have a deck that's very built for that. Because the rogue can push you more than you can remove the rogue. And eventually, the rogue is going to get a super tempo swing, 2 super tempo swings, 3 super tempo swings. They have 2 mana deal 6 damage. They have Vagrant, Cursed, it's Vagrant, right? 7/5?
Cursed Vagrant? Yeah, Vagrant.
Yeah, so they have the Cursed Vagrant, which has 5 stealth health that you're never going to get rid of. Like, they're going to be able to get that last little bit of damage onto your face. They will. So if you're playing really defensively, like, make sure you're actually not taking any damage. If you're just trying to stem the damage that the rogue is dealing to you, you're probably going to run out of steam on the defensive side. Instead, to the extent possible, you have to push the rogue to the rogue's face. Because at some point, the rogue's going to do something, and you're like, oh, I'm going to lose in a turn or two. But you won't if the rogue doesn't have lethal the very next turn, because now the rogue has to remove your stuff because you're threatening lethal. Like, rogues always go down a little bit in health because they have to use their dagger and or other weapons, and that hasn't changed. They're not as vulnerable to it as they used to be, but it's one of those strategies to deal with, any like super powerful class that's not hyper focused on the early game. And rogues are not. They're focused on playing a lot of cards, but in a combo fashion later on. Their early game is not spectacular right now compared to historically, and so you got to take advantage of that and really like force the rogue to do stuff. Hero powers just aren't as good as they used to be because the power level of all the cards went up, and that means the rogue hero power is not as good as it used to be. And so if you can get the rogue to use the rogue hero power, like back in the day, that was automatic turn 2 for a rogue. You just hero power and you're good. You're tempo matching better than most 2-drops that you could possibly play. Nowadays, if the rogue hero power is on turn 2, or at any point without buffing it, that's a terribly anti-tempo play for the rogue. And the rogue's going to take a bunch of face damage. Like, that's a huge win for you if the rogue does that. So, put the pressure on early and make it so that when the rogues do the swings, they can't kill you in one turn, even with an additional reach card. That means you have to keep your health healthy. Like, we're talking, like, bare minimum 15, probably, 20 health. And you do that by threatening the rogue's health. I've gotten away with this so many times where, and you notice the strategy against the Druid is kind of similar, where you really do need to figure out when you won't be super punished and then just go to the face. Even if your opponent, like, I love this. This is how I know I'm winning. I have a 2-drop, they have a 2-drop. They hit my face. I hit their face, then play something else. That's how I know that I'm winning. Just the fact that I am able to do that means I have challenged them to do something else. And then more often than not, as in more than 50% of the time, they can't do anything else. So they either try to race me, or then they trade into my thing. Which, then we've evened out our face damage, and I haven't lost that little step. Back in the day, that little step of 2-3 damage meant pretty much nothing. These days, 2-3 damage is huge. And if you show them respect for it by removing their minions next or whatever, when you don't absolutely have to, you're gonna do that all game long. They know you're gonna do that all game long, and you've just kind of given them the power, and that is a huge advantage in and of itself. So they're not paladins. The rogues aren't even druids. Like, what are you afraid of, right? Like, force the rogue to do the rogue thing and remove your stuff. Always hit them to the face. Don't be afraid if they're also hitting you to the face, as long as you're also hitting them to the face.
Yep. I think that's pretty good advice. And generally, yeah, I got nothing much to add about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, they're good classes. They're overpowered right now. I was really hoping the balance would be better. And in the beginning, it seemed like the balance was better. But now the stats have kind of settled in. And, I mean, it's better than the Demon Hunter meta. But it's not there yet. They got to push the button again. And I don't know when that'll be.
Yeah, this is the inherent problem that we've had with Arena ever since the macro adjusts have come into place. You don't know when the button is getting pushed. After the button is getting pushed, you have a new meta, but there's no continuity and no making sense of why, of what just happened. Sure, you can predict it's this class was really good before, now it is going to be less good. The dumpster classes are going to be much better. You can expect them to be much better. But it looks night and day. Druids, right now, from what Druids looked like, yes, they have the same cards that they did technically, but they really don't. They practically were a different class back then, in sort of their risk assessment, your risk assessment playing against them. And so, with that being said, it's frustrating. It's more of the same. I don't exactly know what to tell you guys. It's one of those things where Blizzard, they have to really go in and have someone who understands Arena go through with, with a very fine comb, and then really kind of smooth out the edges of the meta, which we know isn't going to happen. So this is what we have. You got to wait for the next adjusts, whenever that may be. And that's it. Like, there's definitely skill. There's definitely ways to play around it and everything. It's just, if you find it really frustrating, like I know some people do, to play against Druids and or Rogues, that's kind of it. That's it.
Yep. I don't know. There's not much else to do past that. All right. Well, that's Druid and Rogue, and generally what Arena is like. I know, like, you hear this and you're like, oh, it's a terrible meta. It's not that bad of a meta. Like,
okay.
Honestly, like, and it's not just because we're winning more in this, but it's like a more normal meta than it normally is, which is a weird thing to say. But it's like, if you are on the board and you are doing stuff, you have a chance to win the game. Like, there are metas that swing so hard that that's not true. And after they like nerfed the percent chances of priests getting like dragon-y stuff, and then they brought the demon hunters down, Druid and Rogues are really kind of incremental powers. Like, Druid has that one big swing that is like a really big swing, but even like Mark of the Lotus, super, super good, right? But it's not a giant swing. It's like a moderate swing, because it's a 1-mana card, right? A 1-mana card is super, super good if it provides really any kind of significant swing at all. It's a 1 freaking mana card. But it's not what's winning and losing like every game, the way like a priest wait till turn 9, play the ridiculous dragon, win the game like strategy was, right? The way demon hunters had like a million options once it gets into the late game, and is better at the early game than almost any other class. Like, it's not that. Like, you pretty much get to play your game for the most part. Druids let you play your game. All the classes let you play your game. Even Rogues, which generally historically did not let you play your game, is now so like late game combo-y oriented that they're gonna let you play your game for a while before they start playing their game and like start flipping stuff and whatever. So the game is pretty interactive. It's pretty on the ground, like on the board, stuff is happening, even if it is swinging more than, it did like 3 years ago. It's not swinging anywhere near as much as it does in the bad metas. And you can play your game. And that's really all you can kind of ask for when the cards are built the way they are. So it's not balanced class-wise. You're going to get better decks with Rogues and Druids, but it's also not oppressive. And I think that's the key. You're in a meta where you get to play your game, and other people just kind of have better decks than you, but that's fine. You can still do okay in this meta, even against Druids, even against Rogues, and you won't see them like, I mean, you will see Druids kind of very often. You won't see Rogues that often. But together, they are not anywhere near as oppressive as like seeing a Demon Hunter or a Priest even from before, even though both of their win percentages are higher than Priest from before.
Okay. I think that's it for Arena. It's kind of, I don't know. Do you have anything more to say about it?
No. Just go play the Arena. Like, I think it's pretty fun right now in the Arena. I have no real complaints about the meta besides that they just need to push the button again. Like, and if they don't, I'll live with it. This is like a okay state of balance despite the win percentage. Like, sometimes we come here and we're like, yes, the win percentage is 45% or 44%, and it is terrible, right? Like, those metas have definitely existed. This isn't one of them. Yeah, there are 2 classes that are 44% or, 54% or something, and that looks pretty bad, but it's only, like, kind of bad.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Battlegrounds for a little bit. We don't have any huge updates on Battlegrounds. I think everyone is waiting for the patch, which is almost certain, and I'm so sorry if I jinx it for everyone, but is almost certain to be announced early next week and probably come out Tuesday because that's just sort of what they do. We know that it's supposed to come out late this month, and that means we're running out of time here. We are actually running out of time. Everyone is expecting it. This should be the update that, and I'm seeing people already freaking out that I jinxed it, so I'm so sorry, guys. But this should be the update that includes Quillbores, and perhaps, or not perhaps, it will introduce more heroes, maybe change heroes, buff slash nerf certain units. We're going to get the big content update that everyone's been craving, desperately needed. If you look around the BG scene, yes, there are some people still spamming it, but people like RDU have taken a break. They'll come back. A lot of BG content creators are sprinkling in other game modes, other games, just trying to stay fresh before the next meta because they're tired of just playing taunt comp or getting hit by these mid-game things or high rollers for an insane amount of damage. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually Ixar's Ask Me Anything from Friday. This is April 23rd. Before we do that, just a big shout out to Ixar for doing these. He's been doing these recently and just posting on Twitter. If you guys have any questions, he will probably do more of them. And this is the kind of communication that we've always been asking for. And he's been generous with his time, kind of answering questions. And on this AMA on April 23rd, he answered a lot of, I thought, revealing questions and answers for Battlegrounds. So number one, he talked about monetization for Battlegrounds and adding cosmetics. So one person was saying, hey, I want a lot more cosmetics in BGs. And Ixar just flat out came out and said, we have plans for many Battlegrounds cosmetics. And they say that we should expect the support for Battlegrounds to increase significantly in the next 12 to 18 months. That doesn't mean it'll take 12 to 18 months. That means basically from now until that time, we should see a lot more support. And I think that's what everyone wants to hear as well, because this has been the longest period of time since BGs have come out that we just haven't really seen any real updates. And I think that scares some people. They're just like, what's going on? BGs is super successful. We love it. What's up with this quiet period? It's kind of scaring us. So he basically goes on and say that we understand that players love the mode. It's extraordinarily popular. And they're saying they're actually ramping up design / engineering / art support to match that. So that should be very encouraging to a lot of people. It's like, okay, Blizzard understands. They got something really good going here. And they're going to be ramping up huge. Maybe this was just a period where it's like, we're going to use this time to actually collect ourselves, and then bam, like huge BG support. He also goes on to say that the question was, what is the most surprising data insight in Battlegrounds that you have seen? And Ixar says it's probably the hours played. He doesn't give a specific number, but he said BG is a lot more popular than people realize. Would be a top 5 to 10 game on Steam most days by itself.
That doesn't surprise me. It's the game now. Like we've known it was the game for like a year, that it is the game, and Hearthstone, the other stuff is just like this weird historical vestigial organ that's attached to Battlegrounds.
Yes. Standards is awkward because that's the one that they have Grandmasters in, that they run all these tournaments. And whenever you see the for example, the advertisements, like, Forge and the Barrens, the advertisements, right? Everything is tailored towards constructed. They're like, oh, you could put this in your deck. You could do that. They're not just like, oh, hey, look at these heroes for Battlegrounds. Look at this
all
new
the Quillbores, huh?
Yeah, look at all these Quillbores. That's not in the advertising. So it's weird because I think we've all felt for a while now, it's like, wait, BGs is so super successful. Not a lot of people had the exact numbers. We still don't have the exact numbers, but Ixar coming out and saying, look, we have seen the popularity of BGs, and BGs by itself, just by itself, would be a top 5 to 10 game on Steam, just, like on its own right. That's huge. Like, we know now that, like, okay, whatever we thought was the popularity of BGs, at least we know that there is kind of no reason for Blizzard to be not ignoring it, but not like, just pushing full support behind it. So now we know the numbers. And coincidentally, in the same AMA, Ixar's like, expect big things, expect a lot of support in the next 12 to 18 months. All very encouraging stuff if you're a fan of BGs. You guys should know that, I'm a huge kind of supporter of BGs. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just kind of the future. It's the one that Blizzard is pushing, the competitors are pushing, and I want to be where the competitors are. I don't just want to be facing like Dreads' burner accounts all the time. So I'm very optimistic, and I think if anyone who likes BGs reads this, they should be very happy about it as well.
Yep. I don't have much more to add to that. Just we'll see when the next patch comes, and hopefully it injects some life into BGs.
I hope so. We can talk about the current meta and sort of like why people are frustrated by it. I would say we're in a point where people want it's hard because people want to play kind of fancier things, bigger things, but they want to eliminate the high roll potential, right? But yeah, we're in a point right now where Cthulhu is the number one hero, and that's the ADWCTA meta. Like that's the lack of choice. I push a button. Yeah, I make some choices here or there, but it's all about these like mid-game stats. Oh, there you go. And never getting first, right? And of course, I'm never getting first, and that's fine. It's like you're like the Cthulhu loses to the Omu, loses to the Maiev in the late game, maybe even loses to like the Cat or something, and you're like, okay, that's fine. I take my second place, like my third place, and I move on. So
yeah, second and third place are great.
Well, yeah, I mean they are. They're positive MMR no matter where you are, but it creates a meta that I think people are not too happy about. And the reintroduction of a hero like Wagtoggle, people I think just let out a sigh. It's like that's just Cthulhu 2.0. It's not as powerful as Cthulhu, especially the later you go in the game, right? The hero power is not as powerful as Cthulhu's, but I think people are just a little bit tired of that. And you are just introduced to one of the tough things about balancing BGs, whereas passive hero powers are tough to balance because they cost nothing. And then one cost hero powers, well, that's tough. Like the jump from 0 to 1 is huge. And the jump from 1 to 2 is so big. And there's not really anything in between here. So, for example, with Hook Tusk, they were able to try and thread the needle a little bit and say, okay, it costs 0, but you can only discover 2, right? They had to change the discover mechanic effectively in order to make that fit, because otherwise there's just this huge astronomical difference. And I would say for Hook Tusk, they did a pretty good job. She's good. She's not. I don't think anyone would say game breaking at this point. But it does illustrate how tough it is. I hope the new meta will go away from this kind of Cthulhu Ragnaros meta, which we see right now, because even if people complain about getting high rolled, I don't think people like just pure kind of stats. Which is what the mid game is very dominated by. And the end game is usually won, as in first place is usually won, still by the Jandises and Maevs, etc. But the mid game and this sort of reliance on taunt comps and pure stats and just getting chunked down by all those things, I hope we do see a slight shift away. I don't think people would enjoy kind of, like turn 5 boat into 25 damage, but this right now is I think a little bit too feels bad, man, for the general public.
Yep. I don't have anything more to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to do you want to move on to the question from the goat?
Yeah, sure. We can do a question from the goat.
This is gonna be a short podcast. I feel like we're like in between stuff right now.
We are in between stuff. I wanted to talk about something other than Hearthstone for the question from the goat. I know. And this doesn't have to do with me or whatever. I know you wanted me to like mention my birthday. I don't give a damn. Well,
after you're 35 now.
After you're basically like after you're like 31, you really don't care. Okay. But question
35 is so much higher of a number than 31.
You are obligated to round up. Like math taught you so. 5, you have to round up. Like your elementary school teacher would never lie to you about that. Okay.
And so, I mean, pretty soon you're gonna have as many years as Battlegrounds health rather than arena health.
Wow, that's very true. It's very true. Is this why Patchwork is your favorite? Because you
give myself some extra time.
You got the most time with Patchwork. You're like, Patchwork, you got to stay in the game. If you ever leave, then the cap is significant.
They got to keep buffing him, over the years, just to make me feel okay about it.
Oh God. Okay, so I want to talk about Jeff Kaplan leaving Overwatch.
Yeah.
So if you guys don't know, Jeff Kaplan, the head of the ship for Overwatch, is leaving after 19 years at Blizzard. And in the middle, not even in the middle, near the end of Overwatch 2's development. And I think this really struck a chord with a lot of the community, and not just the Overwatch community, the Blizzard community, because I think in many ways Jeff exemplified what it's like to be basically the lead of a game and interacting with the community. I think more so than any other lead that we've seen in Blizzard in maybe any of the games. I'm not that involved with WoW, so I can't speak about WoW, but no offense to kind of any of the other leads. I think Jeff Kaplan was just so good at what he did in terms of talking with the community, trying to make them understand, getting them into the fold, that it really kind of made some people nervous because it's like, oh, how can anyone be better than Jeff? But I wanted to mention this just because we talk about Blizzard a lot. We talk about Hearthstone here a lot. And I think there are a lot of lessons we can take from like Jeff's time over at Overwatch. And the number one thing is just his ability to communicate so well and make people understand that, okay, like I understand that you guys are frustrated by this thing, and we do hear you. And here is our thinking, whether or not it goes along, like whether we agree with you or not. If they agree, it's like, okay, here's what we're doing to try to change that, but you got to give us time. It's not that easy, which I think some people understand. Most people never will, but whatever. And if they disagree, he did a great job of saying, okay, we're keeping an eye on it. Like, we obviously hear what you're saying. We're not going to change it for the near future because other things are a little bit more important. We think that if we change this tangential thing instead, which you guys haven't really thought of yet, it'll solve this problem in a more elegant way. Or it's just like the stats don't exactly back you up. And we're looking at kind of like lower/higher level play. And we think that that is more representative of kind of like our design theory. He was just so good at doing that. And I played Overwatch a decent amount when it first came out, and I kept up with it. I kept up with like the community. I kept up with all of that stuff. And part of it was I was so in awe of Jeff and his ability to properly communicate to the community exactly what they were thinking, whether or not they disagreed. And this is something that, for example, through Ixar's AMAs, I think Team 5 is getting better at. But I think Jeff really just set the bar for, okay, this is the transparency and the insight into a dev team's thinking that I want from literally any game that is continuing to develop. Like he just really set the bar. And I think for every game community that I see from now on, I would just always compare it to Jeff.
Yeah, and it's just about the communication, because keep in mind, especially in Overwatch's like early days, patches and actual balance updates were not particularly quick. Like, there were so many things unbalanced with the game, and they were moving step by step by step in this really kind of painfully slow way. But there is always progress. And what really kept the community anchored wasn't that, they were great at making all the balance changes. No, they would do a balance change, take it back, they'd mess up. They're not particularly, like, Overwatch balance team is not particularly good at their job in terms of balancing compared to, like, Hearthstone's balance team. But they communicated very effectively, and they're always willing to admit when they were wrong. Like, I've heard Jeff say, well, we tried this, and that was not the way to go, so often. And it's stuff like that just, it gives the guy cred. Like, I love my time playing Overwatch, and partly a big part of that is the dev team and the communication with it, and the contrast, especially at the time, to the Hearthstone team. The Hearthstone team's gotten a lot better at it. Still not that close to even Overwatch's starting point, but at the time, the Hearthstone communication compared to the Overwatch communication was laughable that they're even part of the same company. I think we said that on the Lightforge quite a number of times as we were playing Overwatch. It's like, what is happening at Blizzard? Why is there not even like some rough standard between the two? So yeah, I mean, the community's really going to miss him. What I'm more wondering now is, like, there's rumors and stuff, but more importantly, like, why now? Right? Like, Overwatch 2, the concept and everything is already out. Was there something that he really disagreed with Overwatch 2? Or this also didn't seem like the most well-planned exit. Like, it didn't seem like one day he got up and he's like, I quit. But it also didn't seem like people knew this was coming for like 6 months ahead of time, This isn't like a nice transition out. This is something happened somewhere. And, I'm not saying it's not amicable, but I'm wondering what's up with Overwatch 2 now. Which clearly, and again, I say there was with no information. It could entirely be Jeff's fault, right? I know everybody would expected Overwatch 2. Like, if you talked to me a year ago, I would have expected Overwatch 2 to be out sometime this year. And it's clearly not going to happen. Like, maybe that was Jeff's fault, right? Like, maybe that had something to do with it. Or maybe it wasn't. It was just, like, some other, like, thing. And then the direction is going to go in a different way, and Jeff didn't want any part of it. Or maybe everything's totally fine, and he's just like, I don't want to do another Overwatch game, right? I want to move on and do something else with my career. All possible things, but something happened. And I think it's going to be interesting when Overwatch 2 does come out, what kind of a game that'll be, which I'm still looking forward to Overwatch 2.
Oh, definitely. I think no matter what it is, I'm going to pick it up and try it for at least like minimum, 50 hours?
Minimum.
Yeah, minimum, absolute minimum. I'm going to play it for like 50 hours and then decide, do I want to play it for like another 500, maybe, or more. It's going to be one of those sorts of situations / games. I think, kind of like thinking about Jeff's time at Overwatch, I think it really has highlighted the importance of not just your ability to create a game, but in 2021, especially now, the importance of you understanding the community, number one, and being able to relate, and tie in with your community, and just make sure that at the end of the day, they know that you are listening. Like, that's the thing. You don't exactly have to be doing the exact things that they say, because let's face it, a lot of things that they say are going to probably not be super good. As in, it's one of those, like, it's like that famous Blizzard phrase is like, it's like, you don't know what, I forgot. It's like, oh, you think you know what you want, but you don't, kind of thing, which is very patronizing, but it is very true in a game dev. sense. But it's one of those things where you look at everyone being sad that Jeff left and having all these good memories about Jeff to like the situation in Hearthstone where recently, as in with the whole kind of drama about women getting invited to these invitationals, to even like a year ago, and kind of like Savitz being banned from events. It really just goes to show like it doesn't exactly matter so much in terms of like I made a game with 95% accuracy in terms of the decisions, and people are like 95% happy with either the meta or the decisions I made. It's how people are perceiving you in taking criticism and in understanding their concerns, and just, I guess, not being stubborn or a dick. So it just makes me very sad because I'm hoping that Overwatch 2 is very good. I'm also hoping that with Jeff leaving, like everyone at Blizzard is thinking more about, it's like, oh, okay, how can we carry on kind of the legacy of Jeff Kaplan? And I'm happy about the fact that Ixar is doing these AMAs. If you think about these AMAs, just like 2 years ago, I never thought they would have happened. This is one of those things where 2 years ago, when we talk about the Hearthstone communication, especially when it came to Arena, it was literally non-existent. There was a point in which, for example, like ADWCTA was basically, calling Blizzard out, and they were their response was just like, don't. And now it's they're a lot more, I think, a lot more accepting of criticism, and they've opened things up, and it's not just, it's like, oh, okay, it's a month before the expansion comes out, AMA time. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming for Hearthstone.
Oh. All right, that was Question from the GOAT. Question from the GOAT brought to you by our Patreons at patreon.com/grinninggoat. Thank you guys so much for your support. Keep it the lights on in the Lightforge podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merp. See ya.